Hello, everybody. I'm BC Begley, and these are your news headlines for October the 17th of 2022. Russia hits Ukraine's capital with a wave of kamikaze drones. Russia blasted the Ukrainian capital with a deadly wave of kamikaze drones on Monday in a renewed attack that sent apartments ablaze as soldiers fired into the air. The drones, carrying explosives and their distinctive buzz, terrorized Kiev just a week after the Kremlin's forces unleashed a deadly barrage against civilian and infrastructure targets across the country. This is according to reporting from NBC News. Flooding in Nigeria has killed more than 600 people, the government says. More than 600 people have died in the worst floods Nigeria has seen in more than a decade, according to the nation's Humanitarian Affairs Department. The Nigerian Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management said that as of Sunday, 603 people have died, 2,407 people have been injured, and 1.3 million people have been displaced. Probe after Hong Kong protesters attacked at China-UK consulate. An investigation is underway into violence at a rally organized by Hong Kong pro-democracy campaigners outside the Chinese consulate in the British city of Manchester after video showed one of the protesters dragged into the grounds of the consulate and beaten. The violence flared on Sunday when a small group of people gathered outside the consulate, putting up posters and banners as the 20th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party began in Beijing. Only 26% want Joe Biden to run for re-election. Only 26% of likely voters want to see the United States President Joe Biden run for re-election in 2024, according to the latest Rasmussen reports. The question was asked simply, should Joe Biden run for re-election in 2024? Only 26% said yes, while a whopping 60% said no. 14% said they couldn't decide. Congress investigates how Mississippi spent federal funds amid Jackson water crisis. Two congressional committees want Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves to explain how the country's poorest state is spending hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funds as its predominantly black capital city struggles with crumbling water infrastructure. Protesters camp out near LA Councilman Kevin De Leon's home to call for his resignation. A group of protesters who believe Los Angeles Councilman Kevin De Leon and Gil Cedillo should resign are now camping out at De Leon's home to make their voices loud and clear. Cedillo and De Leon were heard on a leaked audio recording participating in a conversation with racist remarks involving Nuri Martinez, the council member who has now resigned. 4 friends killed in violent shooting, dismembered, thrown into the Oklahoma River. Person of interest has been named. 4 close friends who mysteriously disappeared in Oklahoma were killed in a violent shooting at a scrapyard, dismembered, and thrown in a river, according to police. The owner of the scrapyard, Joe Kennedy, is a person of interest in the quadruple murder, the police chief Joe Prentice said at a news conference on Monday. Prentice said authorities want to speak to Kennedy, who is missing, and stressed that he has not yet been named as a suspect. Russian warplane crashes in residential area, killing at least 4 people and igniting a massive blaze. A Russian warplane crashed Monday into a residential area in a Russian city on the Sea of Azov after suffering engine failure, killing at least 4 people and igniting a massive blaze that engulfed several floors of a 9-story apartment building. An Su-34 bomber came down in the port city of Yeysk after one of its engines caught fire during the takeoff for a training mission. This is according to the Russian Defense Ministry. The Department of Justice calls for a 6-month sentence for Trump ally Steve Bannon. Joe Biden's Justice Department is recommending that Steve Bannon, a former Trump advisor, be sentenced to 6 months in jail and a $200,000 fine after he defied a subpoena to testify before the House Select Committee investigating the January 6, 2021 protest at the Capitol. British pound rises and borrowing costs fall as Chancellor moves to calm the markets. The pound rose and government borrowing costs fell on Monday as investors welcomed the announcement by Chancellor Jeremy Hunt of the reversal of most of the mini-budget tax measures. Sterling extended gains against the dollar and is trading at around $1.14. The news also saw the interest rate or yield on UK government bonds fall, making government borrowing less expensive. Bitcoin is higher to start the week, but continues holding sideways pattern. Cryptocurrencies were higher on Monday after recovering from a sharp drop in the previous week. Bitcoin rose 1% to 19,400 according to Coinmetrics, while Ethereum traded 2% higher at 1325. Prices have held steady since rebounding from a big drop that followed the release of the latest reading on the Consumer Price Index, a key inflation gauge. Washington state wildfire burning out of control, forcing thousands to evacuate. A wildfire burned out of control near the Washington-Oregon border on Monday as thousands fled from the blaze fueled by warm conditions unusual for the Pacific Northwest. The Nakia Creek fire, ignited near Vancouver, Washington back on October 9th, broke containment lines on Sunday and has charred about 1,500 acres, officials said. Firefighters on Sunday night had estimated that about 2,000 acres had burned so far, but by Monday morning, authorities said they got a better aerial view of the wildfire and revised the estimate downward to 1,500 acres. The United States Supreme Court declines to take up effort to secure birthright citizenship for American Samoans. The Supreme Court declined on Monday to take up a case asking whether those born in America Samoa are entitled to birthright citizenship under the Constitution's 14th Amendment. Notably, the government of American Samoa, as well as the American Samoa's non-voting delegate in the U.S. House of Representatives, believed the Supreme Court should not take up the case because, quote, establishing birthright citizenship by judicial fiat could have unintended and potentially harmful impact upon American Samoa society. Update on the Bristol police ambush. Connecticut IG says killer fired over 80 rounds at cops. The Connecticut Office of the Inspector General on Sunday released body cam footage and a preliminary report of last week's Bristol police shooting, saying Nicholas Brucher, who was ultimately killed in the deadly episode, had first fired, quote, well over 80 rounds, attacking the officers from behind. The barrage of gunfire struck and killed 2 police officers and wounded a third, who managed to make it back to the police cruiser and returned one shot that killed Brucher in a justified use of force, the report says. UK Prime Minister Liz Truss faces serious pressure to resign after failed budget. The United Kingdom Prime Minister Liz Truss is facing calls to resign from within her own Conservative Party just 6 weeks after entering Downing Street. Truss and her former finance minister announced a fiscal package, a so-called mini-budget, back on September 23rd. The measures triggered market turmoil, from a plunging pound to pension panic and a rare public rebuke by the International Monetary Fund. French government in crisis talks as fuel shortages worsen. French President Emmanuel Macron called a crisis meeting with senior ministers on Monday to address crippling strikes at gas refineries that has caused fuel pumps to run dry. Macron declared Monday his desire for a solution, quote, as quickly as possible to the protest, promising, quote, to do his utmost to find one. The government ordered strikes at 2 fuel depots near Lyon to return to work after several hours on Monday or face criminal charges, according to France's energy minister. Uganda has locked down 2 districts in a bid to stem the spread of Ebola. Ugandan authorities on Saturday imposed a travel lockdown on 2 Ebola-hit districts as part of efforts to stop the spread of the contagious disease. The measures, announced by Ugandan President Museveni, means residents of the central Ugandan districts Mubende and Kasanda can't travel in or out of those areas by private or public means. Cargo vehicles and other transiting vehicles from Kampala, the capital, to the southwestern Ugandan area are still allowed to operate, the president said. Moscow mayor announces end of mobilization in the capital. Army draft offices will close in Moscow from Monday as the Kremlin's quotas for recruiting reservists to fight in Ukraine have been met in the capital city, according to the Moscow mayor. Quote, assembly points for mobilized people will close on October 17th, 2022, starting at 2 p.m., the mayor said on his website. He said, quote, the task of partial mobilization, announced just over a month ago, had been completed in full within the city. The mayor also said that call-up papers sent out in Moscow were no longer valid. The U.S. sends armored vehicles to help Haiti fight criminal actors. The United States and Canada have both sent armored vehicles to Haiti after its government called for foreign help in defending against gangs threatening to oust acting Prime Minister Ariel Henry. Henry's government faces a mounting political and security crisis after the Prime Minister last month announced an end to fuel subsidies, spurring crippling shortages and soaring prices.